Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Infinite Podcast. Dive bomb with me into the murky waters of super PACs. These political beasts collect cash like vacuum cleaners, skirt around donation limits, and shoot out funding like a broken ATM, thanks to Citizens United. They loom over elections like shadowy overlords. But should their war chests have a cap? Let's get into it, Simon. Tell me your take on these financial juggernauts.
Oh man, super PACs. More like super ATMs for politicians, am I right? These guys are throwing around money like my grandma at a bingo game when she's had too much sherry. The only difference is she's betting on number 7 and they're gambling our future. Cap on donations. How about a cap on grandma's sherry while we're at it?
Haha, your grandma's a riot, Simon. But let's face it, this isn't bingo we're dealing with. It's like real people's futures at stake here. I get the funny side, but with these super PACs, there's no spending limit in sight. Kind of terrifying when you think about it. Betting on politics shouldn't be a high-stakes game without rules. The sherry's got to have some limits. Otherwise, the hangover's ours to deal with. Not cool.
Wait a sec. Money in politics with no limits? That's like wildly insane. I mean, if I had that kind of cash power, I'd probably own a mansion made of pizza by now, or some crazy thing like that. But seriously, folks gaming the system to swing big decisions without any checks? Sounds like we're playing Monopoly without the rulebook. Doesn't that mean someone's always going to be the banker who cheats? Not cool indeed, Joe. Not cool.
Exactly, Simon. It's a mess like playing Jenga with greasy fingers, bound to topple. So here's the thing, man. If you could rewrite the rules for these super PACs, or heck, just tear up the rule book, what's your stance? A straight-up donation cap, or would you prefer another method to keep all that dough in check?
Yeah, if I had the magic pen. First off, we gotta put a cap on it, like one of those child-proof caps that's super annoying to open. Because right now, it's like anyone with big enough pockets can play Puppet Master with elections, and that ain't right. But also, transparency, man. We should know where every dime's coming from, like when you find $1 in your couch and wonder which friend dropped it. Just keeps everyone honest, you know?
Transparency's cool and all that, Simon, but come on, man. Even with rules, big money finds a way through the cracks, like water in a leaky basement. Caps sound great, in theory, but when you've got billion-dollar interests at play, they might just laugh it off, find new loopholes. Isn't it like whack-a-mole? They'll always be ahead of us regular Joes. Reform's tricky, dude. Needs to be more than just slapping on a Band-Aid and calling it a day.
Yeah, Joe, you've got a point, man. It's like we put one rule in place, they just scoot around it, like roaches when the lights come on. Yuck. But here's the thing. Even if caps and rules are like throwing pebbles at a tank, we still got to start somewhere, right? Because otherwise, what, we're just giving up the fight? Nah, can't work like that. We need that clarity to see who's pulling the strings behind the big political puppet show. It ain't perfect, but it's a step.
Simon, the way I see it is, you're dead on. Coming at this with a defeatist attitude is just rolling out the red carpet, saying, come on in and mess with our democracy. Step by step, like tackling a nasty infestation, we've got to shine the biggest, brightest light on these super PACs. Clarity, accountability, that's how change begins. Not perfect, but better than sitting ducks waiting for the next election to get hijacked. Let's keep chipping away.
Chipping away, huh? So like you're saying these super PACs, they need some serious spotlight action to really get what's happening? Because, I mean, if folks knew the deets about who's footing the bill for politicians, maybe we'd vote a bit different, you know? And speaking of voting, isn't that where change starts? Change the game by playing the game, sort of thing. Gotta stick it to those fat cats hiding in the shadows.
Playing the game to change it? Sounds good, but let's be real here. Voting's crucial, yeah, but with all that shadowy cash floating around, voters are like kayakers up against a tsunami. We've got to pump those brakes on super PAC funds so our votes aren't just, drops in an ocean of money. Shine that spotlight, sure, but make it blinding, impossible to ignore. Fat cats might hide, but they can't hide their cash trail forever, man.
Oh, totally. You've got that right. And here's the twist. Super PACs can raise unlimited loot as long as they don't directly team up with candidates or parties. But come on, who are we kidding, right? They're like two kids signaling each other in a no-talking exam. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Plus, unlike regular PACs, these supersized money monsters report donors just a few times a year, not monthly or quarterly. That's like getting your credit card bill once in a blue moon, and then it's boom, debt city, population, you. It's wild out there, Joe.
Yeah, Simon, you're spot on. It's like these donors, they drop cash into super PACs and poof, their identity is cozy in the shadows for months. A credit card statement once in a blue moon is trouble, right? But this, it's way worse. We're talking about the health of our democracy here, not just personal debt. What gets me, man, is that while super PACs should be independent, that line often gets blurry. Think about those issue ads they run close to an election. Technically not endorsing anyone, but clear as day who they're backing. Saying there's no coordination is like pretending your dog didn't eat the steak off the counter, but you've got the evidence right there on his face. We need real-time reporting, like ASAP updates, not just occasional glimpses into who's writing the checks. It's only fair, right?
You're not wrong there, Joe. It's like, saying no one's coordinating is like me claiming I have a diet plan while hiding pizza boxes under my bed. The evidence doesn't lie, buddy. But for real, these issue ads are super sneaky. They're basically waving a huge sign that says, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, if you catch my drift. And yeah, we need the receipts on who's footing the bill smack dab at the moment they write the check, not when the ink's all dried up. And live updates would be amazing, like those food delivery trackers. Your democracy is now being influenced by, oh, look, another billionaire. Keeps it fresh, you know?
Sure. The delivery tracker for democracy sounds pretty slick, Simon. But let's flip the script a sec. Politicians are in bed with these super PACs, right? Those sneaky ads. But even if we had a gazillion live updates or caps, you really think that'll stop them? Power and money, like peanut butter and jelly, they're just stuck together. Here's the twist I'm thinking. What about demanding accountability directly from our reps? Like, yo, we saw this ad funded by X PAC. Explain yourself. Make them sweat under their collars. Democracy ain't just watching, it's doing. Instead of waiting on those broken systems to catch up, voters could take matters into their own hands. Coming at it boots on the ground style might just shake things up more than another report getting lost in the shuffle. What's your take on going full watchdog?
Boots on the ground style? I'm all in. Let's not just bark, but actually bite. If every time they tried to sneak one past us, there was a real person actually calling them out, that would throw them for a loop. I say, let's unleash the hounds of accountability.
Speaking of throwing them for a loop, how about the latest twist in campaign funding? Cryptocurrency is stepping into the ring. This isn't your granddad's fundraising bake sale anymore. Politicians are riding the crypto wave now. Talk about a game changer, huh?
Wait, so let me get this straight. Like, politicians are actually pulling in crypto for their campaigns now? That's kind of blowing my mind here. It's like we've hopped onto a rocket ship heading to the moon, because this is definitely not politics as usual. But hang on, isn't the whole crypto thing kind of a Wild West scenario? How in the world do you keep track of who's giving what without it being, a total mess?
Yeah, crypto in campaigns is wild, no doubt. But here's the deal. Accountability and transparency with crypto can be as good or even better than traditional money, if it's done right. Blockchain tech, where cryptocurrency lives, creates a permanent, unalterable record of transactions. So unlike cash that changes hands in dark corners, every digital coin transfer is traceable. Record keeping could be rock solid. But, and this is a big but, it hinges on regulations catching up, and fast. They've got to set clear rules for disclosing and reporting these donations, like yesterday. Otherwise, the techno boom might just hand politicians a new kind of dark money flashlight to play hide and seek with us. And we're not about to let politics turn into an escape room we didn't sign up for, right?
Hold on here, Joe. While blockchain's all permanent and stuff, the anonymous nature of crypto could be like a double-edged sword. Yeah, you can see the transaction, But who's behind it? Some wallet address? That's not enough to know Mr. Moneybag's real-world name and intentions, yeah? And let's face it, regulation's moving at the speed of molasses. They gotta pick up the pace, or we're looking at the same old hide-and-seek game, but now with fancier tech. Like, if they don't make these crypto cowboys reveal their hand, we might as well be trying to catch smoke with a net. So there's potential, sure, but the done right part is crucial. Otherwise, we're tossing transparency out the window and calling it an upgrade.
Ah, true that, Simon. Figuring out who's behind each wallet, now there's the rub, huh? It's like trying to know who's behind those masquerade masks at a fancy ball. Regulators are slower than a sloth on sleeping pills, man. We can't afford lag in setting rules for this crypto rodeo. If politicians start racking up anonymous crypto donations, it's just old wine in a new digital bottle. And we all know mixing wine's bad hangover. But imagine if they do pull off proper regulation. Campaign fundraisers might end up looking like an episode of Sci-Fi meets C-SPAN, with voters scanning QR codes to drop crypto coins into the virtual hat. Just got to make sure there's a clear line from coin to contributor, or else, what's the point? I'll tell you, Simon, navigating this is going to be trickier than explaining Bitcoin to my grandma. So you see, Grandma, it's like invisible money, but also not. Sheesh, good luck to us, right?
Yeah, imagine Bitcoin for the ballot, huh? Politicians might wear QR codes on lapels instead of flag pins. But picture this. What if your grandma starts out donating everyone in crypto because she secretly minored in blockchain at the senior center? Would flip the script.
You've got jokes, Simon. But let's toss in an opposing viewpoint here. Some folks would argue that incorporating crypto into campaign financing is like opening Pandora's box. Think about it. Cryptocurrencies are volatile, right? One day it's up, next it's crashing down, like a manic roller coaster. This could make budgeting for campaigns kind of nuts. Plus, there's the environmental impact. All that mining for coins ain't exactly green. And then, the know-how barrier. The average Joe or Jane isn't necessarily savvy with digital wallets and blockchain. It's confusing. So this risks creating a donor class that's more, tech elite than the common folk. That's not what democracy's about. So yeah, while the potential for transparency is there, the risks and downsides are just as real and worth chewing over. What kind of complications do you foresee if we go full crypto?
Diving a bit deeper here into the old Pandora's box of crypto campaign funds, let's not forget about, those little things called exchange rates. One day your donation is a couple $100. Next thing it's just enough to buy a stick of gum. Talk about budgeting nightmares for campaigns. And speaking of those environmental concerns, man, they're not small potatoes. All this crypto mining, it gobbles up more power than some countries. Hardly fitting for a clean campaign promise, right? And like I said, making sure every donor is clued in on crypto, that's a tall order. It might just widen the gap between the tech heads and the everyman, not exactly a win for bringing folks together. So yeah, while shining up this digital future, let's not miss the smudges it could leave.
Absolutely, Simon. Talking about exchange rates, the volatility of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin is legendary. One day it's worth nearly $65,000 per coin, then bam, it drops to half that. Campaigns could raise a war chest or end up with peanuts overnight. And power consumption, huge issue. Bitcoin mining alone consumes around 91 terawatt hours annually. That's more than some smaller countries use in a year. It's not just an energy problem. It's releasing tons of CO2, counteractive to any eco-friendly platform. On the inclusivity front, only about 14% of American adults own cryptocurrency. So if campaigns start relying on crypto, it sidelines a big chunk of people who might prefer or only have access to traditional giving methods. Weirdly enough, demand drives innovation. As mad as it seems, this push towards crypto could force a shift, making regular folks more crypto literate and maybe driving greener mining tech. Still, we're playing with fire if there isn't a solid plan to address these very real issues: volatility, environmental impact, and accessibility. Democracy demands inclusivity, man, not an elite digital club.
So you're telling me my piggy bank might need an upgrade to a digital wallet? and I thought teaching it to oink was impressive.
Ha. Well, if your piggy bank turns digital, imagine the adventures of those digital dollars in the campaign world. We might just need to take a wild ride from their wallet birth to their spending spree finish line. It'd be like a day in the life of a donation dollar sitcom. Let's roll with that for fun.
All right, strap in, because this dollar's journey is no walk in the park. Picture this. We start with a bright-eyed buck, fresh from the bank. Let's call him Bill. And Bill's all pumped to support his fav candidate, right? So first up, he gets sucked into that flashy online fundraiser. Tangoing through pop-ups and social media ads, Bill's feeling like hot stuff. But he's quickly shuffled off to a strategy meeting, Tafak, where they're debating if Bill should go toward a glossy mailer or an edgy social media blast. It's like Sophie's choice for campaign cash. And then, suddenly, Bill finds himself in a sticky situation, funding a super PAC ad that's kind of bending the truth a bit. So now poor Bill's got a moral hangover, because this wasn't the dream he signed up for. The grand finale, getting chewed up in the machine and spit out as confetti at a rally. Talk about a wild ride, a mix of high hopes and dodgy detours. That skit would pack more drama than your favorite soap opera, huh?
Diving deeper, think of all the hands Bill passes through, right? Donors like to imagine their money headed straight for the lifeblood of the campaign, grassroots events, voter outreach. But reality check, it's not quite that storybook journey for our buckaroo. Then there's the internal battle, like, does Bill fund a solid policy research project or end up splurged on some consultant's fancy lunch meeting? It's got a sting knowing you might be footing the bill for sushi rather than strategy. And these super PACs, they're like black holes for donation dollars. No real oversight where those bucks breeze off to. Poor old Bill could have been rubbing elbows with lobbyists before he even knows what hit him. So when we riff on this skit idea, we paint a humorous but painfully accurate picture. Every chuckle's got a truth behind it, pulling back the curtain on the not-so-glam side of political funding. Keeps the listeners hooked and might make them wise up next time they break open their wallets, huh?
So if money talks, I bet Bill's got a memoir full of gossip that could take the Capitol by storm. He'd be like the Forrest Gump of campaign finance, popping up in every historic scandal and policy picnic.
All right, listeners just tuning in, you're catching us mid-laugh riffing on a skit idea. A day in the life of a donation dollar, featuring Bill, our fictional buck with big campaign dreams. He's like Forrest Gump, but for political cash. So Bill starts off shiny from the bank vault, ready to boost his favorite politico. But like reality hits, he tangles up in online fundraisers, shimmies through strategy sessions, and maybe funds less than stellar things. Think super PACs bending truths. Yep, it's a roller coaster for Bill, illustrating the sometimes funny, oftentimes murky waters of where your campaign dollars might swim. It's lighthearted storytelling, but with a side of truth about the twists and turns of donation dollars. Keep listening as we bring Bill's journey to life next on Infinite Podcast.
Haha, so here's a thought. If Bill, that's our donation dollar, could really talk, like, what do you think he'd say about where he wishes he could have gone? Before getting lost in the campaign carnival.
Let me spin you a tale here. So like back when I was first dipping my toes into the big kid pool of civic duty, voting, donating, the whole 9 yards, right? I fell for this candidate's charm, thought my hard-earned cash would make waves in local infrastructure talks. Naive. Yeah, dropped a few bucks in the campaign pot and imagined playgrounds getting fixed up, potholes being filled, but instead turned out most of it went to ads on ads. I picture Bill going through something kind of similar, huh? He probably dreamed of funding real change, getting directly invested in policy or education initiatives, feeling useful rather than just another poster boy for whatever campaign tactics were en vogue. But hey, in that journey, my own disappointment taught me value, which boxes to tick and where to hold back the wallet. Bill's adventures, man, they reflect the bittersweet giggle we get realizing that intentions and outcomes sometimes live worlds apart.
Yeah, man, reminds me of this. Time I gave some cash to help my buddy's band record their first album. Felt like putting dough into something real creative, But then I found out they kind of blew half of it on, let's just say, fancy hats. Not exactly the studio time I imagined. So here's Bill. Probably envisioned himself as a hero for democracy or something. And chuckles instead he gets sucked into, what? Paying for attack ads that have less substance than a reality TV show plot. It's eye-opening, though, because like when I saw those band photos, all style and no tune, it clicked that even with the best intentions, money can wander off into, let's call them unexpected expenses. Gotta admit, watching where your bucks go can sometimes feel like babysitting at a sugar-fueled kiddie party.
Totally get that, Simon. Hard-earned cash turning into fancy hats is a kicker. Just like us with the band, Bill's looking at those attack ads feeling played. It's both a punchline and lesson, huh? Democracy's playground ain't all about the slides and swings. Sometimes your dollar ends up funding the sandbox scuffles too. So guys, keep your stories coming. Ever had a bill in your life? Money you thought was going to be a game changer but ended up somewhere else? What do you all think about where our hypothetical donation buck bill could have or should have hustled? Let's chop it up, and meanwhile, we'll keep pulling back the curtain on this political campaign circus.
Guess what they say, huh? Everyone has a price. Sure makes you wonder if democracy's holding the biggest clearance sale of all time with these big donors pulling the strings.
It's kind of a grim way to put it, but not, far off. These huge donations, it's like they come with VIP access. You got to ask, does this warp the whole democratic process? When someone writes a massive check and suddenly policies start bending their way, it's not such a subtle nudge anymore, right? So, what do you guys think? Do these big donor contributions undermine our democratic values, or is it just like part of the game? How do we balance that funding without tipping the fairness scale right off the table?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's like the team with the deepest pockets gets to call the plays, right? Just doesn't sit well with me. And this idea that throwing a wad of cash can just magically open doors to political decision-making, that smells fishier than my fridge when I forget about the tuna salad, you know? Lawyer up, people. Democracy shouldn't be pay-to-play. So what's the fix here? Maybe trim down donor muscle at the negotiation table, like putting a cap on their gains or something. Keep it fair for the little guys, fighting in the good fight without a billionaire's bankroll. It's tricky, though, because you need dough to run campaigns. But when it comes to shaping policy, that should be pure people power, not who's got the fattest wallet. Let's get real. What's the point of casting ballots if the votes are already weighted by wealth?
Yeah, Simon, you touched on a sore spot there. Big donors get the red carpet while average Joe's donations might as well be couch change. And I mean, this is where it gets heated, right? Look at the stats. Large donors represent a tiny fraction of folks, but they're dropping major league cash into the system. So odds are their voice is amplified. Way louder than mine or yours, huh? That's not just disproportionate. It feels like a slap to the whole one person, one vote deal. Sure, cap it, reform it, I'm all in. But there needs to be like serious backbone behind these changes. Otherwise, it's lip service. It's about protecting the integrity of voting. Because if not, what are we even doing here, man? And before someone pipes up saying, it's always been this way, well, that doesn't make it right, does it? Even a shiny apple can be rotten inside if nobody bothers to take a real bite and see what's what. So, how do we find that sweet spot? Keeping campaigns funded, but without letting donors' backseat drive our policies, huh? Thoughts?
Man, it's like we're playing political tug-of-war with greased-up rope. And guess who brought the gloves? The big donors.
Exactly. These donors, they're suited up for the game while everyday folks are lucky if they can grip the rope. So when it's policy on the line, we need rules that don't favor those with deep pockets. Gloves off, everyone should get a fair pull. But hey, is there even an arena where the gloves are truly gone? Or are we playing pretend democracy while the big bucks dictate the real game?
Well, let's break it down. It's like when one group's got a megaphone and the other's whispering into a napkin, you know who's getting heard. We've got to spotlight how these donations shift the scales, so much so that policies can end up looking out for a select few instead of the good old majority. And chew on this. When candidates spend half their time fundraising instead of, meeting with actual voters, doesn't that tell us something's whack? The oxygen in the room gets sucked away by whoever has the biggest checkbook. So we're talking about moral consequences here, too. I mean, if money's the main player in policymaking, where does that leave the values we boast about, like fairness or making sure every voice counts? It kind of taints the process, paints everything with the same dollar sign brush, right? Bottom line, big donor influence has to be reined in. Otherwise, democracy is more like democracy. And I'm pretty sure that wasn't the original idea our forefathers were going for.
You're not wrong, Simon. This whole fundraising dance, it's like candidates are spending more time courting billionaires in back rooms than shaking hands at the local diner. That's got to change. But here's where I'll push back a bit. While we crank on big money in politics, and rightfully so, can we really ignore the public's apathy? Sometimes it feels like people are just watching from the sidelines. We complain about these donors calling shots, but then barely half of us show up to vote. So yeah, rein in donor influence, cap the cash flow, whatever it takes to clean house. But also, let's rally the people to vote, pay attention, and hold elected folks accountable. It's like two sides of the same coin. Only one side's been facing the ground far too long. Because if we don't match this with civic participation, we're still going to lag. Democracy is not just about stopping the big checks. It's about filling in those dot matrix voting sheets too. Let's balance this conversation with a call to action, What do you guys think can be done, both in law and in our own day-to-day actions, to straighten out this crooked path?
Sure, we can slap on a Band-Aid with new laws and hope things stick. But let's face it, the real plot twist is when we, the coffee-sipping podcast-listening crowd, start throwing punches in the ballot boxing ring. Change doesn't just hang on a law. It starts with that morning mirror pep talk. You're a voter, kid. Act like one.
Point taken. We don't just need changes on paper. We need an uprising of everyday heroes. Like if voting were a sport, let's treat every election day like it's the Super Bowl. Show up, get loud, and make those plays that'll shape the future.
Speaking of the whole vote like it's the Super Bowl vibe, let's dive into another field where the stakes are high and the perks are almost too good to be true. I'm talking about lobbyists. Those guys live in a world that's more luxury than most of us can even dream of. They've got these retreats, experiences, perks that sound like they were ripped right out of a VIP concert package or something. Makes you wonder, Are these just thank you gifts or smooth moves in the persuasion playbook?
Yeah, Simon. So lobbyists are not just getting pat on the back with these perks. It's like they're being wined and dined in the luxury suite of influence. And sure, on the surface, it's all about showing gratitude, right? But the glitz isn't just for show. It's strategic. I mean, think about it. High-end retreats aren't just relaxing getaways. They're often meeting hubs where big ideas and big policies get traded over cocktails. These exclusive experiences, they're not just fun and games. They're cementing relationships in a setting that's more sway than play. And it's no secret in their world. If you can charm someone in this lap of luxury, you're halfway through the door of persuasion. It's pretty slick, but it leaves us asking, is this the way we want things run? Because let's be real, most of us don't live in that kind of extravagance.
Oh, for sure, Joe. This whole high roller lobbyist life, it's like something out of a Bond movie, But hey, let's pump the brakes here, because that's our democracy on the line, not just some fancy dinner tab. So we've got these lobbyists all comfy in luxury land while they're pushing agendas with more zeros than my phone number. And it's slick, let me tell you. Real slick. They get through the door waving a weekend getaway or a round of golf at some private club as if they're just handing out flyers for a bake sale. But is that what we want? Legislation influenced by who can give the fanciest bottle of wine or the snazziest holiday package. It's one thing to be generous and another to dab icing on decisions with sweeteners. It's got to make you pause, take a breath, and ask, isn't there a line? Or did that line get blurry from all the champagne bubbles floating around? All right, folks, weigh in. Where do you think that line should be,
Oh, don't get me started on that line, Simon. It's as blurry as my vision before my morning coffee. But here's the kicker. Imagine if every time a lobbyist handed over a luxury retreat invitation, we, the public, got a real-time alert. Talk about transparency meets TMZ drama.
Oh, Joe, that's hilarious. It's like I remember this one time, right? I got this gift card from a friend for helping him move, and it was to this steakhouse that was so fancy. The menu looked like a mortgage payment, okay? So there I am sitting down, feeling all important, ordering like I'm some kind of big shot because of this little piece of plastic in my pocket. But then, as I'm chowing down on this steak that is honestly way too good for me, a thought hit me. Am I going to help this guy move again just for another taste of this life? Heck yeah. And that's when it clicked. It wasn't just about the steak. It felt like I had been given a golden key for an afternoon, right? A small taste, sure, but enough to make me think about how easy it can be to get used to those kinds of perks. So connecting the dots, eh? If a simple gift card could nudge me towards lifting another sofa, imagine what weekends at golf resorts do in the lobbyist world. It's like a gateway drug to the high life, only instead of more heavy lifting, they might be swaying laws. Wild stuff, huh?
That steak story paints a picture, doesn't it? It's wild. We're talking about swaying votes with marbled ribeyes. Imagine then what happens in those back rooms where the stakes are always sizzling, and the stakes are even higher.
Oh, I can't do that. But isn't it crazy to think about how these backroom banquets could be where the fate of our laws is marinated? It's not just a bunch of conspiracy talk. There's real-world evidence that high-end perks and swanky getaways have historically played a role in shaping policies. Just look at past scandals and reports. Sometimes we're talking about major legislation influenced over caviar and the finest wines you've never heard of. So here's some meat for thought. When lobbyists report their spending, which, let's be honest, is kind of like kids reporting their own grades, they often cite hazy categories like entertainment or travel. Really helpful, right? Not so much. Digging up numbers is like a needle in a haystack quest. And when you do get the stats, well, it turns out lobbyists aren't shy. We're talking millions upon millions spent each year to keep influencers influencing, and likely not while munching on dollar menu burgers. Now, that might sound fine and dandy until we remember they're not using monopoly money. That cash influences decisions that affect real lives. Makes you think twice about what expense counts as necessary in the lobbying rulebook, eh?
Right? It's bonkers. We're living in a world where some folks are tossing around millions like confetti at their influence parade. Makes the game of Monopoly look like child's play.
Absolutely, Joe. And if we peek behind the curtain, this isn't just about throwing money around, it's what that money does. How these showy gifts aren't just warming hearts, they're silently shaping policy. Now, let's not forget some of those historical oopsies where lavish tokens ended up turning the tides in the halls of power. We've got case studies stuffed with more twists than a pretzel factory, showing us the cozy connection between luxury love bombs and legislative leanings. It begs the question, is gifting an art or an arsenal in policymaking? Let's dive into the ethics pool with our water wings on and splash around some historical examples.
Well, take the Abscam scandal, right? Classic 70s sting operation. Reels in lawmakers with bribes disguised as investments. Boy, did it show us the power of a lavish gift. And when you see officials pocketing envelopes of cash on camera, it's eye-opening. It's not just historical fluff, it's clear evidence. These aren't just shiny trinkets, they're tools shaping policy behind the scenes. The thing is, how do we clean up this act without stripping genuine advocacy and dialogues that can actually benefit society? That's the razor-thin line where ethics meets reality. Tough to navigate, but necessary, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Joe. Boy, oh boy. Abscam. That's such a name drop, like something out of a mob movie, not real life. But it's wild because it's true. A bunch of folks got caught red-handed accepting cold, hard cash. Policy shaping or pocket lining? You tell me. And right, it shows the power of a plush pocket. Policy perspective swayed by some dollar bills. But look, here's where I lift the needle off that old record for a sec. Because there's got to be more than just pointing fingers and frowning at lobbyists. I'm thinking, hey, not all advocacy is about flying first class to bribery town, right? There are genuine causes getting an honest push from guys and gals who ain't in it for the luxe retreats. But, that ethical tightrope you're talking about, now we're in circus territory, my friend. Keeping the balance between effective dialogue and influence peddling, it's like baking with volatile ingredients. One wrong move and bam, kitchen disaster. So what's the fix? A sprinkle of transparency, a dash of hardline limits on gifts, or maybe even, I don't know, mandatory public service ads saying, "This bill was brought to you by Mr. Moneybags." Just kidding. Well, sort of. There's got to be a way to make sure those backroom deals get a little daylight, don't you think?
Absolutely, Simon. Imagine if those backroom deals were as transparent as glass houses. Suddenly, lobbyists would have to throw stones a bit more carefully.
Right, right? So here's the thing about glass houses. Okay, one time, like I was in this fancy tech store looking for a new phone, and the place was all shiny gadgets and gizmos. Total paradise for tech geeks, you know? But get this, they're serving champagne while you browse. Champagne, as if picking out a phone isn't hard enough without bubbly vision, right? So anyway, I'm sipping because why not? Getting the full VIP treatment, when it hits me, they're softening me up. They want me all loose and happy, so my wallet gets loose too. I mean, sure, I left with a phone I barely knew how to use, but the whole glitz and glam, the way they turned shopping into this event, it wasn't just about selling, it was persuasion on steroids. And that got me thinking later, like, what if every sneaky move, every glossed up pitch they threw at me was in broad daylight? Maybe I would have walked out with my old phone and a clearer head. So yeah, transparency, it's a game changer, even outside the political ring.
Man, if only we had a transparency app, like Shazam but for sniffing out persuasion. Point it at a lobbyist, bam, know their game before they even play it.
Heh, a transparency app, Joe? Now that's science fiction double feature stuff right there. But wouldn't it be wild? Like you just zap someone with your phone and up pops all their hidden agendas floating in little cloud bubbles above their heads. But diving back into the deep end here on how these gifts shape policy. Dude, politicians are people, right? And people, well, we're kind of predictable. You flash some bling, offer a taste of the high life, and suddenly everyone's singing a different tune. Like, consider this. Studies show that when a doc gets a free lunch from a pharma rep, they're more likely to prescribe that company's meds. Small thing, big ripple effect. So if crab cakes can change healthcare, think about what international resort getaways do to an official's mind. It becomes less about votes for the folks and more about what's in it for me. Building more transparency. Now, that's like fitting smoke with a leash, right? Super tricky, but we gotta try. Maybe something like real-time disclosures or, heck, even plain old barcodes on lobbyists. Scan them and see what falls out. Keeping an eye peeled for those sneaky small print shenanigans buried in the gift baskets? Yeah, that might keep our so-called public servants actually serving the public. Way easier said than done, but hey, we can dream, can't we?
And you know what, Simon? If those fancy lunches sway doctors, imagine politicians at a five-star banquet. Makes you wonder who's really on the menu during these policy dinners.
What, for real? Docs getting swayed by a free BLT. That blows me away. Because you gotta think, man, if doctors are falling under the spell of a sandwich and soda combo, then imagine what goes down when the stakes are like sky high, with politicians surrounded by more luxury than my entire apartment complex. It sort of flips the whole script on who's actually being served up. Because it's not just about which caterer did the salmon right, it's about who's sitting at those tables, cutting deals between bites of gourmet cheesecake. And these aren't just any old deals. They're the ones shaping the world outside those ballroom doors. You're picturing this schmoozy dinner scene, thinking it's all fun and games, until you realize policies affecting millions might be getting passed around with the bread basket. Who's really on display here? Makes you want to stand up in the middle of their five-star spread and say, "Hey, whose interests are you plating up tonight?" Wild thought, huh? Man, I'm reeling from the idea that the menu could very well include bits of our future, nestled right next to the asparagus spears.
You got it. our rights and future as today's special seasoned with influence. Makes you rethink the whole concept of free lunch, doesn't it?
Yeah, the free lunch. There's like no such thing, right? We all know that. Anything that comes up as on the house has got some strings attached. It's like imagining someone handing you the keys to a Ferrari just because they like your face. Come on, and policy decisions. Those aren't freebies or perks. They're supposed to be made on merit, not marinated in whatever sauce you were dipped in at last night's dinner gala. Take, for example, pharma companies. They're notorious for dishing out gifts to docs. Studies have shown this throws a wrench in the whole prescription process. That tiny little pill bottle might as well come with a keychain or fridge magnet that says, brought to you with love from Pharma Inc. When you chew on that notion, it really puts things into perspective. And what I mean is, there needs to be a separation of stake and state, if you know what I'm saying. Like, banquets should be for celebrating, not conceiving policies over dessert wine pairings. So, back to our lawmakers chilling at lavish banquets. You said, who's really on the menu? Man, how do you even savor the taste, knowing the potential aftermath of those hors d'oeuvres could be, say, compromised school funding or bending environmental protections? And sure, we could try enforcing stricter guidelines or ramp up transparency, toughen gift laws until they're steel-plated. But getting everyone on board is like herding cats who've tasted caviar. Good luck pulling them back to kibble. Quite the pickle, don't you think?
But what if it's the kibble, not the caviar, that keeps them honest? Imagine lawmakers nibbling on budget bites while making billion-dollar decisions. Might just keep their feet on the ground and their heads out of the champagne clouds.
Ha, Joe, that's hilarious. They'd be like, wait, where's the fancy stuff? Now just plopping a bag of dry kibble before them and watching their faces. Talk about a dose of reality. Speaking of reality checks, though, I heard some wild stories from the old lobbyist grapevine. You wouldn't believe the shenanigans these guys pull off, all in a day's work. They've got tales that might just make you snort your coffee out your nose, real classy-like. Let's shimmy over to this one doozy of a tale. Picture this. A friendly game of golf turns into a showcase for underwater basket weaving lessons. No joke. As a unique perk offer. And let's not forget the time a lobbyist casually offered up a lifetime supply of cheese wheels, because sure, who doesn't want their own personal cheese vault? It's straight up stand-up comedy, except everybody's in suits instead of on stage.
Underwater basket weaving? Man, that is something else. I mean, what are you even supposed to do with that skill? Imagine putting that on your resume. And a lifetime supply of cheese wheels. For real? It's like, here's your career, topped off with a side of Gouda. These lobbyists must be chuckling in their bespoke suits, dangling these utterly absurd perks around. Like, how normalized has this gotten that they're just slinging brie alongside the bills? It's beyond Monty Python. It's a whole new sketch show, legislative laughs, or wait, capital comedy. I can see the tagline now, where the laws are made up and the perks really matter.
Yeah, capital comedy. That's spot on. And let's not forget about that lobbyist who offered free clown services for a year. Because, like, nothing says serious policymaking quite like balloon animals and honking noses at your birthday bash, right? You're penning laws one second, and the next, you've got Sparkles the Clown asking where to set up his unicycle. But hey, if lawmaking ever goes sideways, they've got a solid backup as party entertainers. It's wild. These lobbyists know how to play the game with a straight face while handing out ludicrous perks like they're Oprah. And you get a cheese wheel, and you get a hot air balloon ride. It's ridiculous, but you gotta laugh, or you just freak out at how bananas it's gotten.
Oh man, imagine if those clowns actually influenced policy. What's your take on tax reform? Well, according to Sparkles, we should consider subsidizing squirting flowers. Can this get any more bizarre?
Heh, tax reform by Sparkles. What a world that'd be, huh? Throw in a few juggling pins with the budget plan and bam, entertainment tax credit. It's like, who needs economists when you've got a clown car full of policy advisors? But really, it gets you thinking. What if these funnies were less on the nose and more, hidden under layers of serious talk? Like, one minute we're discussing infrastructure, and the next, Someone slides in a sneaky amendment for funding rubber chicken research. No joke. And it's like, where do we draw the line between useful dialogue and just plain old circus acts? Hey Joe, you think folks can actually stay grounded with this avalanche of absurdity coming at them?
Grounded? With this level of ridiculousness? Simon, staying grounded in that circus is like trying to keep your socks dry in a rainstorm. It's probably not going to happen when you've got more perks flying around than actual policy talk. Well, how does anyone take it seriously anymore? And, rubber chicken research? Sure, let's toss some tax dollars at that. Sounds clucking essential. It's bananas, right? You can't make this stuff up, except, they did. Makes me wonder what other wacky amendments are out there, quietly being slipped into serious bills while we're all too busy chuckling at the clown show. Legit might start examining these laws with a magnifying glass and a whoopee cushion for good measure.
Oh, Joe, it's like this one time my buddy got this job at a fancy schmancy tech startup, right? And I'm talking swanky, free food, arcade games, the works. So like he's thrilled, obviously. Who wouldn't be? But here's the catch. While they're getting shoulder massages and hitting the foosball table, their workload is piling up sky high, unbeknownst to most. Every perk was just one more glittery distraction from the mounting tasks nobody had time for because they were too busy, living the startup dream. It was as if those perks whispered, "Don't mind that avalanche of emails. Let's hit the ping pong tourney instead." I remember him laughing about it at first, like a kid in a candy store with no cashier. But then, not so much. Ended up burnt out, with some serious lessons on what actually mattered on the job underneath all that flashy stuff. Kinda puts a spotlight on those wacky amendments you mentioned, eh? Gotta look past the rubber chickens and whoopee cushions to see if we're actually getting anywhere. Or just spinning our wheels in a ball pit full of empty promises and playful distractions.
Makes you wonder if the real work perks aren't massages or arcade games, but just some good old peace and quiet to actually get stuff done, doesn't it?
You're spot on, Joe. All those frills and games are cool and all, but sometimes it's just noise, right? A real perk is having the space to focus, not like getting your zen trampled by constant pings of incoming whimsy. And speaking of getting things done amidst chaos, back to our capital critters. It's like this one time, no lie. A lobbyist was gifting trips to space as if they were handing out candy on Halloween. Space? I mean, come on. How's floating in zero-G going to help anyone draft better trade policies? Might as well strap a jetpack on Congress and blast them off, since they're all up in the clouds already, right? And here we are. Meanwhile, stuck down here on Earth, trying to figure out tax codes without the benefit of, like, lunar enlightenment or something. Wacky amendments tucked into serious bills. It's surreal. Like finding a whoopee cushion under the honorable judge's seat. So maybe we trade some of that circus for good old silence, let lawmakers hear their own thoughts, maybe even constituents' voices. Remember those? Keep the perks, sure, give them decent coffee, I say, but let's keep our feet and laws on terra firma, huh?
Ditch the space trips. Lawmakers need reality checks, not rocket ships. It's wiser to ground our policies in people's voices than in the silence of the cosmos.
Ha, talk about keeping it real, Joe. But you know what's really out of this world? The fine line walk some of these lobbyists and lawmakers do. It's like a tightrope between fancy perks and actual, work. Speaking of which, bringing it back down to earth here, how do they balance that temptation with staying transparent? I've been wondering, can you enjoy the good life without selling your soul, or is it all just smoke and mirrors with a side of steak? Let's chew on that for a sec. Where should we draw the line so that folks don't end up on the wrong side of an ethics review, or worse, lose trust where it matters most? It's an ethical enigma, if I ever saw one.
Simon, this reminds me of a time when I was offered a fancy watch by a sponsor after closing a big deal. It was a tempting piece, for sure, shiny, sleek, and more than a little flashy. But there was this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach about taking it, kind of like eating sushi from that sketchy place down the street. So I turned it down. It wasn't easy, but it really made me think about the value of staying transparent. Sure, I could have taken the watch and nobody would have, batted an eye. But what does that say about my principles. It's all about keeping sight of what truly matters, integrity and trust. And let's be honest, those are worth more than any fancy wrist bling.
Well, Joe, I get where you're coming from, really. But let's flip the pancake for a sec. What if accepting something like that watch isn't always bad? Like, okay, imagine this. You've put in the work, nailed a deal that's good for everyone. Win-win, right? So here comes the ethical pickle. If that shiny timepiece is within legal gifting boundaries and disclosed properly, can it be just a thank you without strings attached? Could be more like an acknowledgement of hard graft than a sly move to curry favor. Some folks might say it's about intention and context. Long as there's clarity, like crystal clear, no fine print, and maybe a policy framework that keeps everyone above board, might not be such a sin to accept perks on occasion. Could be seen as part of the give and take in professional relationships, you know? Keeps the world spinning, grease for the gears. But yeah, trust and integrity, those ain't cheap commodities up for auction. So maybe it's about finding that balance, playing by the rules while still keeping it classy. It's complicated, like rub your head and pat your belly at the same time, kind of tricky.
I guess it's all fun and games till someone gets a Rolex, right? But you slap a transparency label on it, and hey, maybe now we're just officially sanctioned buddies with benefits. The thing is, even with rules, it's still a slippery slope. Don't need ice to recognize thin ice.
Heh, you ain't wrong, Joe. Getting fancy gifts can be like skating on that there thin ice. Start twirling around too much and you might just crash through. So, it's all about knowing your limits, right? The moment those benefits start clouding judgment or swinging decisions, well, we've officially jumped the shark. But this is all making me wonder, like, do these transparency rules actually serve their purpose, you know? Or are they just for show? Sort of like those terms and conditions no one ever reads but always agrees to. What's really keeping things honest here? Or is everyone just winking along with a don't ask, don't tell policy?
Well, to dig a bit deeper into that, you see, it's like when you put up a fence around something. The idea is, to keep things in check. But sometimes the gate's left wide open or the fence ain't tall enough. With transparency rules, they're meant to keep everyone honest, right? It's sort of like saying, look, we know gifts happen, but let's keep them all out on the table where everyone can see. That way, theoretically at least, we reduce backroom deals and under-the-table handshakes. But here's the kicker. Just because you can see something doesn't mean it's not affecting decisions. It's human nature, like Psychology 101. A gift, even with a spotlight on it, can still, subtly swing opinions. It's a pat on the back that makes you want to pat back. It humanizes the whole ordeal. So, maybe what's important is always questioning the intent behind every shiny watch or cheese wheel, even within the legal limits, and like constantly adjusting these policies so they're not just another document collecting dust. Gotta keep pushing for real clarity, not just check boxes. After all, maintaining public trust, that's one tall order without any shortcuts or cheat codes.
Yeah, Joe. I mean, you gotta ask yourself, right? Is seeing believing, or is it just more comforting to think we've got it all under control when stuff's out in the open? But here's the thing. Even with all that transparency, does knowing that Congressman so-and-so enjoys free golf trips really change anything? Or like, does it just make us numb because now it's legal, so it must be okay? Just because it's disclosed doesn't scrub away that ethical grime, you know? And get this, some transparency rules are about as sturdy as a house of cards in a tornado. Could be we need tougher guidelines, or heck, maybe less focus on perks and more on, actual results from these policy pushers. People ain't robots. We're messy, emotional creatures. And every cheese wheel, every trip to space, kidding, it's gonna leave a grease mark somewhere, shape actions in subtle ways. So ain't it time we looked for something better than rules that can stretch like bubblegum under a shoe? I'm just saying, let's swap out those kiddie fences for real accountability. No gate left open. And hey, let's keep asking the hard question. Not just, is this legal, but is this right? Keeps things spicy instead of sliding into ethical snoozeville. What do I think? Should there be a cap on these so-called legitimate benefits, or is that just playing whack-a-mole with lobbyists who'll always find a new loophole?
Well, cap or no cap, we're playing a game of cat and mouse with human nature. Once you slap on a limit, someone will just find a fancier cat or a faster mouse.
Oh, Joe, I just had a twisted thought. Imagine if state-sponsored sabbaticals were like jury duty for politicians. Surprise! You've been selected for mandatory chill time. Keep calm and govern on after your break.
That's an interesting spin on it, Simon. Mandatory chill time, like that'd be something to see in politics. Some people might argue that politicians need a break to clear their heads, right? But there's this tricky bit about using public funds for essentially personal relaxation. It leaves you wondering where the line is, or should be, between a deserved rest and, let's say, tax-funded leisure. And when you think historically, lawmakers were expected to serve and then go back to their day jobs, not take paid breaks. So what happened to that? It's a policy quagmire, sure. I mean, got to look after mental health, yes, but also got to ensure public trust stays intact while not crossing over into what looks like a privilege funded by John Q. taxpayer.
All right, Joe, let me dig a bit deeper here. So think about it like this. Every job has some sort of vacay policy, right? It's part of keeping folks sane and productive. But when it's coming out of public funds for politicians to play hooky, take a break, that's where it gets hairy. Back in the day, and we're talking horse and buggy times, politicos were expected to serve their term and then return to normal life, like you said. No high-flying retreats on the people's dime or anything. It was all about service over self-care, public duty over personal downtime. Now we've got these debates about state-sponsored relaxation times. Sure, everyone needs to recharge the old batteries. Know what I mean? The noggin needs a rest if it's going to work good. Like, sometimes I zone out just deciding between sandwiches. But using taxpayer money, well, it got to be justified properly. If they're going to spend that cash on taking breaks, there's got to be some clear lines, something showing us regular folks that there's actual value in it, not just an extra perk piled on top of their serving platter. Some countries do it different, like make politicians use their own dough for time off, or limit how much rest they can pick at the taxpayer salad bar. Maybe it's about finding that balance where the mind gets rest without pocketbooks getting a workout. Huh? Trust me, the last thing constituents want is for it to look like the Capitol's turned into Club Med. So, yeah. There's my 10 cents or however much that'd cost to voice on a sabbatical hotline. Whew, look at us, diving deep. Never thought I'd yap about politicians' vacation policies, but here we are.
Yeah, wouldn't it be a spectacle if the effectiveness of these sabbaticals was, actually measured in legislation passed or satisfaction ratings? Put those vacay days to the test.
Ha! That's like rating your Nana's Sunday dinner by how fast everybody eats. Whoa, Grandma, this pot roast just got you 5 stars on Yelp for Politicians Sabbatical Edition.
You're killing me with that one, Simon. But, sure, let's squeeze a bit more juice out of this. Like, imagine there's an app tracking vacay results, PolitiRest or something, with crazy metrics on vacation efficiency. Thing is, you kind of got to decide if thinking time leads to better governing or not. It's like, does chillin' equate to winning for the public good? Maybe a fresh mind kicks back stronger laws, or maybe it kicks back feet up, sipping pina coladas while Rome burns. So if we treat state-sponsored breaks like performance enhancers, there should be, real ground rules. Clear goals, even like stress levels before and after, policy ideas birth post-break. Sounds kind of clinical, but hey, taxpayers might want to see a return on investment beyond tanned politicians. It ain't just about cash. It's peace of mind knowing their bucks aren't funding just another line on a postcard. It gets you noodling over whether relaxation time is a privilege we treat as policy or vice versa. Because the thing is, no matter how you slice it, it feels a tad odd to foot the bill for someone else's R&R when you're scrapping together your own long weekend plans, right? Now there's a brain bender.
So, what we're noodling on is if these policymaker pauses actually cook up something tasty for Joe Public, or are they just sprinkling tax spice on a grand old vacay?
So, This one time, I was on this hike right up in the mountains, way out there where your cell phone's just a fancy rock. And I'm trekking along, and it's tough, the kind of tough that makes you question your life choices a little bit. There I am, about to take a break by this stream. It's all natural ambience for days, when I see this older guy zipping past me like he's part rabbit. Dude must have been at least 70, but just motoring. And here I am, pausing every 5 minutes, doing deep breathing exercises, or, trying not to pass out. We end up camping near each other, share stories around a fire, and he tells me he hikes once a month because it clears his head, gives him perspective for his business. He runs a nonprofit for youths. Says if he didn't step away to recharge now and then, he'd burn out and wouldn't be any good for the kids who look up to him. His deal got me thinking about downtime objectively, not just time taken away from work, but as something that can actually enhance performance. Sure, these were personal funds, but what struck me is the value returned for the investment, even when it's difficult to measure, likely more of an art than a science. So relating back to those folks we're talking about, could their time off come back as dividends for us common folk? Is there a hike for clarity equivalent in those sabbaticals? Because gosh, if there is, I'd like us to tap into some of that wise mountain man energy in governance. Wouldn't you?
Hey, Joe, maybe politicians should have trek trackers. Step by step, they earn sabbatical time based on the miles they walk in their constituents' shoes. Now that's trailblazing policymaking for you.
Speaking of keeping score, Simon, let's pivot it a bit to those exclusive playgrounds politicians often escape to. Global golf greens and such, like Camp David or Checkers where heads of state tee off. So the question is, do these sweet spots, funded by taxpayer cash, actually serve a bigger purpose beside giving stiff suits a place to loosen their ties? Historically, some big decisions have been made on these grounds. But then again, some fancy excursions just seem like they're for schmoozing without much to show in the name book of legislative wins. It's a fine line between productive powwows and pricey putt-putts on the public purse. What impacts do you reckon these retreats really have behind those closed, gilded gates?
Well, Joe, let's just be real here for a sec. These high-end haunts, splashed out with all the fancy fixins on the taxpayer's dime, it ain't always about world peace over a round of golf, right? Take Checkers or Camp David. Yeah, they've been the backdrop for crucial chinwags, important stuff like the Camp David Accords back in '78. But come on, how often do we actually hit that sort of jackpot? Most times it's more vague tease-off than takeoffs toward tangible treaties or pacts. Then there's the optics to wrangle with, like when citizens are tight-belting during tough times and their hard-earned cash is going towards these ritzy retreats. It just smells kind of fishy, doesn't it? Behind those swanky gates, issues might get ironed out, sure, but taxpayers are left wondering, what did we really get from this? It's murky as a mud puddle after a downpour. Try now to connect luxury lounging with real legislative leaps forward. So all in all, while these getaway greens have their place in history and could maybe grease diplomatic gears, most days they just crank up the public skeptic meter. And hey, if you're forking over bucks for someplace you can't even step your big toe into, shouldn't you expect bang-up results? Just saying.
Yeah, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, what's the going rate for a handshake on the 9th hole? Maybe we should start demanding photo finishes for policy races, not just snapshots of grinning politicians on pudding greens.
Oh boy, Joe, that would shake things up, wouldn't it? We'd need a whole new album just for policy paparazzi snaps, catching politicians in the act of actual work.
No kidding, Simon. Caught red-handed with a bill instead of a club for once. There's a long history here. If we flip through the annals, those fancy retreats sometimes pull their weight. Picture it. Camp David has been ground zero for some landmark negotiations, the aforementioned '78 Accords where President Carter brokered peace between Egypt and Israel. That quiet woodland setting stripped away distractions, helping world leaders to focus on the nitty-gritty, historic proof that retreats can serve a higher purpose. Or how about Checkers, eh? Used extensively by British prime ministers. It was there that Winston Churchill hashed out war strategies during World War II. Those rolling hills have seen more than just luxury. they've been witness to intense stress and breakthrough moments that have shaped modern history. But the kicker is, these outcomes are exceptions in a sea of routine relaxation that mostly generates blips on the radar of political progress. Peering into these instances gives us some trophy moments, sure, but taxpayers nowadays want consistent scoring, not just occasional hole-in-ones. So, retreats with hefty price tags underwritten by Joe Public require stringent oversight. The return on investment isn't so much a tangible sum, rather diplomatic advancement or policy breakthroughs. But let's not kid ourselves. Each scorecard should be publicly audited to see if these greens are worth their keep beyond shiny photo ops.
Oh, for sure, Joe. These politicians are slicing and divin' on the green more than happy gators in a luxury swamp. If they keep score like my golf game, we're paying big for every swing and a miss.
You know, Simon, this whole thing's like watching a golfer with a no-limit credit card. They're hitting the links, not worrying about what each swing costs. And us, we're just caddies in this game, carrying the clubs. So we've got these historical wins like the Accords and Churchill, strategizing at checkers. But when you zoom out, I mean, how are taxpayers really benefiting from these luxury spots beside a headline here and there? I can't help but think, gotta be better ways to facilitate these big talks without breaking the bank, right? Diplomacy on a budget doesn't roll off the tongue quite the same, does it? But that's the $1 million, or should I say taxpayer dollar question. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for peaceful resolutions and strategy meetings, but do they necessitate swanky settings each time? Can't breakthroughs happen in less opulent spaces that don't require a line item in the national budget labeled political playgrounds? Imagine policy decisions wearing overalls instead of tuxedos. Less show, more substance. Because balancing books isn't about cutting corners. It's about cutting ostentatiousness sometimes, too. Or like, is it essential to debate agricultural bills while surrounded by golf courses that probably use more water than some farms get in a year? So when you say paying big for every swing and a miss, you hit the nail on the head. And heck, if you tally up the misses, seems clear that targeting taxpayer funds toward genuine talk shops without deluxe trimmings might be a solid hole-in-one for public trust, you know?
Absolutely. And you know what's wild, Joe? Maybe heavy-hitting decisions could just come out of a round table at the local diner. Turns out the world's fate might hinge on coffee and pie more than we thought.
That brings to mind the time I found some real clarity at this local joint, Rosie's Diner, just off Route 40. So like, it's a cozy spot, right? Dripping with Americana and grease in equal measure. The kind of place where truckers rub elbows with bikers and everyone's on a first-name basis with the waitresses. I'm there because my car decided to throw a tantrum 50 miles too soon, and while I'm munching on the world's most perfect apple pie, the one that tastes like freedom and a grandma's hug, I overhear this table next to me. They're these guys, looks like they're road crew workers, and they're debating, like, passionately about infrastructure, the condition of roads and how funding's never enough for what really needs fixin'. And get this, Simon, they've each got ideas, real solutions. They're not just griping. It wasn't pie-in-the-sky talk. These fellas could seriously reroute a few legislative sessions. There I am, forks deep in pie, and listening to these unofficial roadside policymakers hashing out grassroots strategies and thinking, why aren't their voices heard where it counts? Why is it that big decisions are made far away on luxury greens and not in places brimming with lived experiences? That diner roundtable gave me more food for thought than any spread at high-end retreats. Maybe those policy power play grounds seem essential from inside the bubble, but from where I sat, belly full and heart warmed by genuine conversation, seemed to me the heartbeat of change, echoed strongest amidst coffee refills and clinking silverware. It's almost poetic. Day-to-day wisdom pouring over counters possibly holds more weight than what's traded across manicured lawns. If only we'd tune into these diners as much as the exclusive enclaves. Imagine the policies baked in reality rather than privilege, huh?
Maybe we should swap the suit and tie summits for apron and oven mitt meetings. Bet they'd hash out sturdier policies with a side of crispy bacon.
Speaking of crispy bacon, It makes me think about those high-stakes meetings. Imagine this, Simon. Picture us thrown into the thick of it, living that lobbyist lifestyle at a five-star luxury retreat. There we'd be, lounging in our slice of paradise, trying to make sure every round of golf and each spa session counts, like putting environmental laws right in between swings or, I don't know, slicing through trade agreements with the precision of a massage therapist working out knots. It's funny how something so absurd actually doesn't seem too far from reality, does it? Let's slip into some improv and take the mickey out of this scenario.
Yeah, Joe. So there I am, knee-deep in the sand trap. I mean, strictly speaking, for the optics of struggling with nature and stuff. And here comes Senator Slickback, whispering sweet nothings about tax breaks, all while I'm pretending to look concerned about my lost ball. And I go, Senator, if we're talking green, let's help out those little turtles, huh? Golf balls for them are like tiny plastic moons they didn't sign up for.
Well, yeah, Simon, I bump into Senator Slickback later at the omelet station, right? And he's watching his eggs get flipped while I'm like, hey, Senator, how about we flip some energy policies too? Like sunny side up for renewables. His brows shoot up because dealing with gridlock's one thing, but oil and gas, now that's a sticky pan if you burn it. And get this, as I munch on bacon, I sneak in. So, speaking of sizzling, these climate targets ain't gonna hit themselves, huh? Maybe trade some carbon footprints for actual footsteps. Replace coal plants with plant plants. It's cheeky proposing green growth over breakfast toasts. But hey, moments like that, cooking up change with a side of hash browns, it's like we can't help stirring the pot when the kitchen's this hot.
And don't forget, Joe, every great change starts with small seeds, or in our case, scrambled eggs and a solid chat up at the egg station.
You're right, Simon. And speaking of seeds, there I was at the putting green, pitching to Senator Swing Miss about, agricultural subsidies. I told him it's like our putt game. A little push in the right direction makes all the difference. Instead of tossing cash into those chemical-ridden farms, we take the high road, like literally. High-rise vertical gardens in urban spaces. Picture skyscrapers with leafy greens jutting out like nature's own ornaments. Job creation meets environmental rejuvenation. It's not just efficient, it's a sight for sore city eyes. Then at the spa, while we're getting facials because you've got to look fresh for these face-offs, I'm chatting with lobbyist Linda. She's all about pushing big pharma agendas. So here's me, cucumber-eyed and all, throwing her a curveball. Linda, imagine healthier communities needing fewer meds because, they have access to more wholesome food, clean air, and parks over parking lots. Breaking through the bubbles of these high-end hobnobbing hubs ain't just mayhem, Simon. It's where reality checks might cash in. Gotta grease the wheels sometimes with a bit of wit and whimsy to make 'em see straight, or at least aim straight, shot by shot.
Oh, that's a good one, Joe. I mean, floating ideas in the steam room with Congressman Cloud9 about cloud storage for, all his data-driven policies when he's really just trying to sweat out the small stuff. And I slip in, Congressman, imagine backing up every file onto an actual cloud, right? Let's call it the Stratus Storage Initiative, like nature-based tech solutions, clean and high-flying. He chuckles because it sounds nuts, but then again, aren't all great ideas kind of pie in the sky at first? Oh man, speaking of the sky, why stop there, right? Maybe we lobby for drones delivering tacos on Taco Tuesdays, cut down traffic, and bring joy from above. Yeah, these luxury retreats, sometimes you just gotta float some balloons and see which ones don't pop by checkout time.
Oh, for sure, Simon. Going back to that Stratus Storage Initiative, see, it's key we use language they get jazzed about. Cloud-based storage already sounds ethereal, so why not match the metaphor with a bit of blue sky thinking, right? I mean, pushing it further into eco-friendly tech might just work. If the congressman gets people high on clean clouds instead of smoke, imagine the fanfare. And talk about levity. These drone-delivered tacos could, lift more than spirits. They might just airlift some common sense into how we address urban transportation and fun living. It's not sci-fi. It's a clear sky chock full of practical, yet joy-inducing solutions. So technically, it's sitting in these steam rooms, or between birdie putts, where we're crafting the narratives that push envelopes, or drones in this case. And though half-baked ideas can come off as hot air, once you cool them down, might find something solid cooling on the windowsill, huh? And despite the playful spin, clouds, drones, it's those whimsy thoughts that sometimes plant serious seeds, right? Like perhaps real innovation starts by floating impossibilities while wrapped in spa towels. Here's to hoping our light-hearted balloons soar high enough to offer a new vantage point. A bit whimsical maybe, but hey, the big picture often includes some doodles in the margins.
Well, am I out of steam or what? Ah, gotta wrap this up. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Hope you found our wild rants and sweet nothings at least half as amusing as we did. If your brain's frying from all this heat, just know there's always more where that came from. Catch us tomorrow, same time, 5 p.m. Eastern, for another whirlwind of wacky wisdom right here on Infinite Podcast. Stay quirky out there.
Hey, while we're wrapping up, Simon, let's not forget those times when these secluded summits feel shrouded in more mystery than a magician's convention. And you start wondering if their idea of disclosure means just opening the curtains to their ocean view suite.
Sure, opulence might be a great backdrop for Instagram, but it makes lousy wallpaper for transparency. Most folks can't even peek through the keyhole of these so-called disclosed retreats.